video is about the back of worksheet 5. I'm going to do the names of the compounds starting with the formulas. This is for the even questions on the worksheet. All right, the first one here is number 2. Copper 2 sulfate. That's the name. How did I figure that out? Well, I want to point out that just like the other video, there's a periodic table up here to help us. There's also the other flow chart from your packet. This is the one where you start with a formula and you want to go to a name. Both flow charts are in your packet. All right. The way we do this problem is you start with the chemical formula of a compound and you want to find the name. Is H first in the formula? No. Does it start with a metal or NH4+? Yes, it does in fact. That means it's ionic. If you have a metal and nonmetals, it's ionic. It has charges. Are there 2 elements in the formula? I count 3. I count copper, sulfur, and oxygen. That means that it's a ternary compound. It contains a polyatomic ion. You got to look up the polyatomic ion on your list, and the polyatomic ion here is the SO4 part, which is sulfate. That's part of the name. Do you know the charge of the metal from the periodic table? Well, if we look up copper, it's in this section, the transition metals, which we don't know what the charges are. Remember, copper is one of the elements that we have to have a Roman numeral with. It could be 1+ or 2+. So therefore, you need a Roman numeral and you determine the charge from the atom it's paired with, and from the anion it's paired with. In other words, you have to look up the charge of sulfate. Sulfate's 2-. You find that out from your list of common polyatomic ions. Now that we know that sulfate's 2-, how many overall minuses there are? All right, you're going to be tempted to multiply the -2 times 4 and get -8. That's not the case. The reason is, how many sulfates are there? We're not talking about oxygens. How many sulfates are there in this compound? Well, there are 4 oxygens in sulfate, but there's only 1 sulfate. That means the overall side's 2-. If you had more than 1 sulfate, it would say SO4(3), for instance. That would mean that there would be 3 sulfates and the overall would be 6-. That's not the case here. It's only 2-, therefore the copper part has to be 2+. Now, that makes you think that the Roman numeral for copper is 2, but the 2+ has to be divided over the 2 coppers. So each copper is actually only 1+. So this is copper, Roman numeral 1, sulfate. By the way, if you're not sure whether this is the right answer, you can always go the other way and try to figure out the formula from the name. Let's do that. Copper 1 is Cu1+, sulfate is SO4, 2-. Then you have to crisscross, so the 2 goes down there and the 1 goes down there, and that in fact forms Cu2SO4, which is the right answer. That's the original problem. So we have this right. It's ionic, and the name is copper Roman numeral 1 sulfate. Let's move on to number 4. Let's go through our flow chart. H is not first. It does start with a metal, therefore it's ionic. Are there 2 elements in the formula? No, there are 3. There's aluminum, oxygen, and hydrogen. There are 3 different elements. That means it's ternary. That means it contains a polyatomic ion. So what's the polyatomic ion? I have to look it up. It's hydroxide. OH is hydroxide. Now, let's go to the next question. Do you know the charge of the metal from the periodic table? Let's look up aluminum. Aluminum's in the 3+ column. So yes, in fact, I do know the charge of the metal. You don't need Roman numerals then. That's what it says there. You're done. Just look up aluminum. So it's the name of this is aluminum hydroxide. Again, you could go backwards. Al is 3+, hydroxide is 1-. So crisscross, you get Al1, and then you have to protect the hydroxides with parentheses and put 3. Notice the formula is not AlOH3. OH3 is not hydroxide. That's actually the hydronium ion, which can't bond with aluminum. So it can't be that. That is not the answer. Let's move on. Number 6. Let's go through our questionnaire. Is H first in the formula? Why, yes, it is. The compound's an acid. This is one of the acids you should know. This is sulfuric acid. RIC. acid. This is the acid of sulfate. That sulfate, when you have hydrogen pluses with it, it's sulfuric acid. The answer you should have is sulfuric acid. It's an acid. Number 8. Let's go through our list. Is H first in the formula? No. Does it start with a metal or NH4? No, it doesn't. That means it's molecular. It has no charges. Name it by putting prefixes on each element that corresponds to the subscript. And then end it with I. That's what it says. Ends with I. So the prefix for 2 is di. And the prefix for 5 is penta. And then we need ide on the end. Remember, no crisscrossing for molecules. This is a molecule. So this is dinitrogen pentoxide. Why not pentaoxide? Well, if you wrote the A, I wouldn't mark it wrong, but it sounds better to just say pentoxide than pentaoxide. It's just a chemist's thing. Don't worry about it. There's no A, but if you put the A, I'm not going to mark it wrong. Number 10. All right, people are going to get confused on this one. Is H first in the formula? No, calcium's first, Ca. Does it start with a metal or NH4+? Everybody gets this always messed up. People think calcium's not a metal. Calcium's a metal. Of course it's a metal. It's right here on the periodic table. It's in the metals. These are the metals. Below and to the left of the zigzag line are metals. Calcium is a metal. You might not see it as a metal mostly. The forms of calcium you see are like Tums. Tums doesn't look very metallic to me, but calcium actually comes in metal form. You can get calcium turnings. They're actually calcium metal. Calcium's kind of reactive though, so it's kind of hard to make it be a metal. Anyway, does it start with a metal? Yes, it does. It's in the metal region, so calcium is a metal. That means that this is ionic. All right, next question. Are there 2 elements in the formula? No, there are 4 this time. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. It's a ternary compound. The compound contains a polyatomic ion. Look at the common polyatomic ions list you need to memorize. Write the metal name first. So the metal name is calcium. C-A-L-C-I-U-M. All right, this is one people get wrong a lot of the time. I see phosphate here, yeah? And I see calcium here. What the heck is that doing there? Well, all right, this is something a lot of people get wrong. This compound does not have 3 parts. It's not calcium and hydrogen and phosphate. No, 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 no. If you look closely at your polyatomic ion list, you will see there's actually a polyatomic ion that's listed on your sheet that says HPO4 2 negative. That's this thing. This thing has a name. It's called hydrogen phosphate. So this compound is not calcium and hydrogen and phosphate. It's calcium, hydrogen phosphate. Hydrogen phosphate is the ion. It's the anion here. So that means it's calcium, hydrogen, phosphate. That's the name. That's the answer. Calcium hydrogen phosphate. Yeah, hydrogen phosphate's weird, but there's a few others like that. There's hydrogen carbonate, which also has the name bicarbonate. There's hydrogen sulfate, which also has the name bisulfate. There's calcium dihydrogen phosphate you can make. There's lots of those hydrogen things in front of ions. Let's move on to number 12. Let's go through the flow chart. H first? No. Does it start with a metal? Yes. It's ionic. Are there 2 elements? This time there are. There's just aluminum and fluorine. It's binary. Just write the name and end with ide. So aluminum, fluoride. Finally, we should address this last question. Do you know the charge of the metal from the periodic table? Yes, I do. Aluminum's there. It's always 3+. Yes, you don't need a Roman numeral. No Roman numeral. So that's the answer. Aluminum fluoride. Remember my pet peeve, don't spell fluoride wrong. Let's move on to 14. There was a typo originally on this on the worksheet. I'm sorry. SN should have a 3 down here. You might have a worksheet where it's a 2. It's actually supposed to be a 3. It shouldn't affect your answer that much, but you can't have a 2 here and a 2 here because the ratio would have to reduce, and that actually couldn't exist. You shouldn't have SN2 PO4 2. So typo, make sure there's a 3 there. All right, Let's go down the flow chart. H first? No. Does it start with a metal? Yes, it's ionic. Are there two elements? No, there's 1, 2, 3, tin, phosphorus, and oxygen. So it's a ternary compound. It contains a polyatomic ion. Look it up. It's phosphate. All right. Then write the metal's name first. It's tin. And do you know the name, charge of the metal from the periodic table? In fact, this time tin's here. It's underneath. No, I don't know what the charge is. That means I need a Roman numeral. All right, we hate finding the Roman numerals, but we got to do it. In order to find the Roman numeral, you need to know the charge of the anion. So we got to know the charge of the phosphate part. Phosphate's 3 negative, 3 minus. All right, how many phosphates are there? There's 2 of them. There's not 4 of them. This 4 has nothing to do with anything. You can't cross it out. Yeah, so I shouldn't have done that. But you can't use it to multiply. So 3 times 2 means this entire side is 6 minus. That means this entire side has to be 6 plus. But the 6 plus is divided over 3 tins, so each tin is 2 plus. So tin, Roman numeral 2, phosphate. Remember I told you that there was a shortcut that you could use? Sometimes the subscripts tell you what the Roman numeral is. Sometimes. Right. What you still have to look up phosphate and write it down. It's 3 minus. If that subscript's the same as that charge, then this subscript's the same as this charge. This is 2 plus. All right. Be a little careful with that. If, for instance, let's say this 2 wasn't here and the 4 was there, that 4 is not a crisscrossed 4, so it wouldn't have anything to do with the charge up here. Nothing to do with it. Anyway, this is 2 plus. This is the answer. Tin, Roman numeral 2, phosphate. 16. All right. Is H first? No. Does it start with a metal or NH4? Yes. This is ionic even though it doesn't have a metal. And this is weird. It's an ionic compound that doesn't contain a metal. Stranger things have happened. Why is it ionic? It is. Chemists can't really comment on it other than it contains ions. Apparently, ammonium acts just like a metal. Are there 2 elements? No. 1, 2, 3, 4 elements this time. It's ternary. It contains a polyatomic ion. In fact, it contains 2 of them. This is ammonium, and this is phosphate. And since there's no metal involved, you can't even answer this last question. It's not relevant. That's the answer, ammonium phosphate. 18. Is H first? No. Metal? Yes, it's ionic. Are there 2 elements? No, it's ternary. It contains a polyatomic ion, which is sulfate. Do you know the charge of the metal from the periodic table? Tin's here, so no, I don't. That means you need a Roman numeral with the metal. So this is tin, and you got to figure out the Roman numeral. Oh God, we hate this. But you got to look up the sulfate part. It's 2 minus. There's 2 2 minus things. There's 2 sulfates here. So it's 4 minus overall. This whole side's 4 minus, which means this whole side, the positive side, the cation side, has to be 4 plus. And there's only 1 tin this time, so all that 4 plus is on the 1 tin. This is tin, Roman numeral 4, sulfate. That's the answer. 20. Yikes. Is H first? No. Is there a metal or NH4 at the beginning? No, this is a molecule. So we need prefixes. That one's going to be di. That one's going to be tri. And like the thing says, we have to end with ide. So this is di, phosphorus, trioxide. Notice ox is the only part of the word oxygen that remains. 22. Last but not least, is H first in the formula? No. Does it start with a metal or NH4 plus? Kind of. Boron's a metalloid. It's not really a metal, so no. But it's not really a non-metal either. So I would be okay if you name this like ionic things, or if you would name it like molecular things. If you really want to know what kind of thing this is, you got to look up the electronegativities and do it that way. But I think we can be pretty safe naming in a molecular fashion here. So that means we need prefixes. We need to put tri for the 3, and we need to end with an ide. And so this is boron trichloride. Some of you might ask, why don't we start with mono? Mono means 1, and there's 1 boron. The reason we don't start with mono is if we started every compound with mono, if it only had one of the first thing, the whole dictionary of chemical compounds would be monos. Like seriously, the mono section, the M section of the dictionary would take up 3/4 of the dictionary. So it's kind of for practical reasons we don't start these things with mono. We just put boron because if we put boron, people will know, oh, there's only really 1 boron. We put mono in front of the second thing if there's only one of them, just to prevent any ambiguity. We don't want people to accidentally think it's ionic. All right, that's it. See me if you need any extra help or other worksheets.